All right, welcome back. We're going to pick up where we left off last time as far as the quadratic formula goes, and I'm going to run you through one more example just to get you back to just remembering. I'm finding that Thursdays to Mondays would be a little bit of a longer gap, and just nice to have a warm-up problem on something we already did. So remember that whenever we're looking at the quadratic formula, it's x equals negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. Our number in front of the x squared is a, the number in front of the x is b, and the number behind it or added on is c. Now we just plug in. Negative b, that's a negative 3, plus or minus the square root of 3 squared minus 4 times 4 times 2 all over 2 times 4. And now we start the process of simplifying. So I get negative 3 plus or minus the square root of 9 minus, and then 4 times 4 is 16, times 2 is 32, all over 8. Now we simplify what's inside the root. Gives us negative 3 plus or minus 9 minus 32 gives me negative 23. All over 8. And now we have the square root of a negative number. We learned from the last section that that gives us an imaginary anytime it's a negative. So the square root of the negative 1 gives me the I, comes out in front. And then 23 is prime. So this is going to be negative 3 plus or minus I. 23 is prime, so it can't break down at all. Its only factors are 23 and 1. And then that's over 8. And that's where you would stop. You don't have to find any other solutions. You don't have to simplify this, like find the square root of it and get a decimal answer. You just stop there. And so because I'm letting you know that ahead of time, I definitely do not want decimal answers. And so just leave it as a fraction if it can be simplified. This root doesn't break down. Negative 3 over 8 doesn't reduce. And root 23 over 8 doesn't reduce. So you just leave it in this form. So if I see you with a decimal answer on your homeworks or on your quiz coming up on Wednesday, for the record, we have a quiz on Wednesday. It's going to be on the quadratic formula and on our last section with the complex roots and all that. Kind of just because they tie in together, so it makes it nice. But this is how I will want your answer on the quadratic formula section of the quiz and on your homework tonight. All right. That takes us to the discriminant. And when I look at the discriminant, it's the part that's under the square root. It's the b squared minus 4ac. So the discriminant is part of the quadratic formula that you can use to determine the number of real roots of a quadratic equation. I'll give you some time to write that down. So when we look at the discriminant, or the number under the square root, if I do b squared minus 4ac, and I solve that out and get a number greater than 0, that tells me there will be two distinct real solutions, both where they cross the x-axis in two spots. if I solve that b squared minus 4ac and I get a number that's equal to 0, then I know it's going to be one distinct real solution. So it's only going to cross right at the vertex. And if that number is less than 0, that tells me right away that it's going to be two distinct non-real or complex solutions. So now that it asks us to find the number and type of solutions, the type and number of solutions for the equation, the first thing we have to do is we have to get it equal to 0. So we have to get everything on the same side. So I do x squared, and then I have to get the 12x over to the other side, so I have to subtract it. So it makes that minus 12x plus 36 equals 0. Now I just plug my numbers in from the b squared minus 4ac and see what that gives us. So I do b squared, so that's a negative 12 squared minus 4 times 1 times 36 negative 12 squared is 144. 4 times 1 times 36 is also 144. So I get 144 minus 144, that's 0. Since that's 0, if I go back to my chart, I can see that means there's going to be one distinct real solution. And that's my answer. If I am working through the quadratic formula, I can use this just by looking at it to tell me how many solutions I should end up with, and if I should end up with an I. So as I'm working through the problem, like if we go back to one of the previous problems, if we go back to this problem, whenever I do what's inside of here, 9 minus 32 gave me a negative 23. Since that's less than 0, that automatically tells me that I'm going to end up with an imaginary or complex solutions, and that there's going to be two of them, my plus and minus option. If we look at some of the other ones we did before this, like this one, here, whenever I did what was inside the square root, that gave me positive 24, which tells me I'm going to end up with two solutions, 4 plus square root of 6 and 4 minus square root of 6. So that if I get to the end of the problem and I find out that maybe I have a complex solution and I shouldn't, then it tells me I did something wrong. All right, I want you to try this one, see if you can come up with the type and number of solutions for the equation. First, I have to get the 12x to the other side, just like before. So give me x squared minus 12x plus 40. Now it's b squared, which would be negative 12 squared, minus 4 times 1 times 40. I guess we don't need the equal 0 on there anymore. Negative 12 squared is 144. 4 times 1 is 4, times 40 is 160. Good. So then 144 minus 160 gives us negative 16. So what would our type and number of solutions be? Your mic's cutting out. It's like getting real staticky. Yeah. Well, no. If we look back at our chart, it's going to be two distinct, and this number's smaller than 0, so it's going to be two distinct non-real complex. So that would be your answer. Two distinct non-real complex. And I realize that's a lot to write, but you could just do 2D and C, and that works for me. All right, let's do try this one, and then we'll move on to our last type of question for this. All right, first thing we have to do, add the 4 over to the other side. Now that it's equal to 0, we do our regular equation, b squared minus 4ac. It gives us negative 4 squared minus 4 times 1 times 4. Negative 4 squared is 16. 4 times 1 times 4 is also 16. 16 minus 16 is 0. So what kind of answers does that give us? Distinct. One distinct equation or one distinct solution. Good. And we should probably throw the word real in there just so we know that it's a real solution or a real number. All right, I think we should leave off there for today. Tomorrow we'll do a couple word problems and get you ready for your quiz on Wednesday. Quiz on Wednesday. All right.